Hello and welcome to the News at 7, where we get to the heart of the day's stories and communities across Scotland. Tonight, as two Edinburgh high schools go phone free, could others follow?
I think it's like a really positive thing that they're trying to do for us. I think it'll come with some struggles at the start and it'll take a while to get used to, but I think the outcome will be really good.
We'll speak to a campaign group about the move. Also tonight, the UK's largest oil and gas producer announces it's cutting 250 jobs in Aberdeen.
So our clear message, and the message from the city to the Prime Minister tonight, is end the windfall tax and end it now. Enough is enough.
And we'll have all the sport with Sheila. What have you got for us tonight?
We'll be speaking to a former British and Irish Lion who tells us which Scots he thinks should be in Andy Farrell's squad for the Tour of Australia.
And we meet an AI Viking made in Orkney. Hi, I'm Laura McKeever. Welcome to the News at 7. Two high schools in Edinburgh have become the first in the city to implement a phone-free policy. Pupils at Portobello and Queensferry Highs are being given pouches with magnetic seals. They'll be allowed to keep hold of them, but will be expected to keep them in the pouches until the end of the school day. Here is the view from Portobello High.
It's quite a big change for me, but I do understand why the school have done it, and I hope it will help our education.
I'm honestly not bothered because you're not really on your phone too much in school, and it will help with our learning. It will help us focus a lot more. I think it's a really positive thing that they're trying to do for us. I think it'll come with some struggles at the start and it'll take a while to get used to, but I think the outcome will be really good.
I think it will be difficult to get used to because everyone's so used to having their phone on them, but then again it's going to be difficult because sometimes people like to text their parents or maybe text them to put money on their fingerprint for lunch, and that will be a different, but then we also have the office, we can do that as well, so that's good.
There's been a lot of work gone into today, this launch. We've been working on this for about 8 months, and that's definitely involved working with parents, all our young people, and specific groups as well, and all our staff. And yeah, there's a genuine appetite for change, and we feel that this policy is going to give us the outcomes that we're looking for.
So should other schools follow suit? Well, joining us from Edinburgh is Hannah Ortle, the founder of Delay Smartphones. Hannah, good evening to you. This is just two high schools, first of all, but presumably you welcome this move.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a long time coming. The private sector have really jumped onto this. It was actually in July of 2022 that the UN said all schools should ban smartphones. And so it's great we're starting to see this, but we really just need a lot more speed rolling this out across the rest of the country.
And tell us more about why you think smartphones shouldn't be in classrooms or even schools, full stop. What's the evidence around this about the impact they have?
Certainly, well, even in Scotland, 83% of teachers have said their lessons are interrupted regularly by phones going off. These are the most distracting devices that have ever been created, and it's just not appropriate in a learning environment. It's the duty of schools to protect children, make sure they're safe at school, and make sure they're in an environment that can help them learn. We know from a Common Sense Media study, some kids are getting 5,000 notifications a day. So it's really hard to learn and, when you're being distracted that much. But it's also the exposure to harmful content that's getting brought into schools. So I think that it's not just the exposure, but it's also just their social development, the way that they're, with their peers, the way they're interacting. They're just looking at their phones all the time instead of actually enjoying being with each other and socialising at lunchtimes.
Is it also the case, though, that they'll be doing that out of school, that this doesn't address those problems of addiction, of misuse of phones as well, and bullying that will go on after school or into the evening?
100%, yes. I mean, I think that this is just, school should be a time where they can get that respite. I think anytime sending kids to school with video cameras in their pockets, it's not a good idea, especially doesn't help bullying. But we really encourage parents to look for alternative devices. They don't need adult iPhones and smartphones. They just need a basic phone that's there to communicate with their friends, family when they're not with them. And things like a Nokia or a basic watch will do absolutely fine.
What are you hoping other councils do with this now? And do you think it would have been better, Hannah, for the Scottish Government to have given national guidance on this, for it not to have been a case of individual schools being able to make up their minds?
Yes, completely. Because what happens when the Scottish Government said, we support head teachers who want to ban this in school, that's actually the opposite of supporting them. Because like these pouches, they can be quite expensive. The schools need to fundraise for those. And they're not supporting schools because we know that this is the one rule that kids will break. When there's bans in school, often they'll say, you can't use them in the classrooms, but we know that kids will check them. If it's a law, then it's not guidance anymore. Then teachers have got that to back them up. It's so much easier for them to be able to enforce that. And so I think a lot of schools can be hesitant because they think, can we make sure that this is actually going to be enforced? And they need that support from the government. And it will be a lot easier if the government does it and we have, across the whole of Edinburgh, across the whole of Glasgow at the same time.
OK. Hannah, really good to hear from you tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. So what do you think? Is this a good idea? Should other schools follow suit? Do get in touch with us. We love to hear from you. And our email address is right there for you on the screen, news7@bbc.co.uk. That's news7@bbc.co.uk. Next tonight, Harbour Energy, the largest oil and gas producer in the UK, has announced it's cutting 250 jobs from its Aberdeen operations. The company's blamed what it called punitive government measures for the decision. It had already announced 350 job losses 2 years ago. The issue was raised earlier at Prime Minister's Questions.
So can I ask the Prime Minister, in fact, can I invite the Prime Minister to come to Aberdeen and explain to my constituents why he is willing to move heaven and earth to save jobs in Scunthorpe while destroying jobs in Scotland?
Mr Speaker, nobody wants to see job losses, but I'd remind the right honourable member that before we came into office 10 months ago, the SNP government in Holyrood, alongside the Conservative government, did absolutely nothing for projects like Grammer. Absolutely nothing.
Well, Ryan Crichton represents Aberdeen and Grampian Chamber of Commerce. And earlier I asked him what the job losses will mean for the city and its defining industry.
There's sadness that 250 people are needlessly losing their jobs in our oil and gas sector, and anger at the lack of response from the UK government, and I think a bit of anger at the lack of humility in the response from Sir Keir Starmer at Prime Minister's Questions this afternoon. Since the Energy Profits Levy has been brought in 2022, there are now 10,000 fewer roles in our oil and gas sector. That's 25 Grangemouths, yet we have not seen any kind of government response to the jobs being lost here. So our clear message, and the message from the city to the Prime Minister tonight, is end the windfall tax and end it now. Enough is enough.
Well, the UK government appeared to give such a vote of confidence in Aberdeen by putting GB Energy there. Have you seen any of those benefits that were promised along with GB Energy?
Well, I think the time to judge the success or otherwise of GB Energy will come down the line. We were very encouraged at the fact that it's going to be headquartered here. It's still to receive royal assent, so I don't think it's fair to judge its job creation yet. We know it's going to be an investment vehicle which will leverage in other investment into the green energy sector. But I think the big part of the frustration right now is that we need to accelerate renewables and continue producing oil and gas in the North Sea at the same time. It's absolutely fundamentally important to support that supply chain that will get us to net zero, to make sure that they have work and projects today. And that's why driving investment away from the oil and gas sector puts that transition in jeopardy. And we're also having carbon capture jobs being put at risk today as well. That should be a real siren to the UK government that they are getting their plans for the energy transition wrong, and that they need to engage meaningfully with the industry to understand what the issues are and to make sure that we avoid more job losses like we've seen at Harbour Energy today.
Keir Starmer did pledge more support. What should that support look like? What would you like to see happen now?
I'd like to see him come to Aberdeen to meet with some of the companies which are being forced to cut jobs, and to meet some of the people whose jobs are needlessly being lost. This is not an isolated job loss. Last week we had a company go into administration here, Beam. That's 200 jobs. The week before that, there was 50 jobs went at a company called Belmar Engineering. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are 200,000 people employed in this sector, but that is going to dwindle fast if we don't see rapid action to remove the windfall tax, which is currently slated to last until 2030. It needs to end now if we're to avoid serious job losses in this region and across the UK.
Ryan Crichton there from Aberdeen and Grampian Chamber of Commerce. Thank you very much for joining us on tonight's News at 7. More to come in the programme, including we look at the legacy of an Aberdeenshire mum who was determined to remember her sons lost during the Second World War.
It's a good idea to get the barbecue out for the weekend because we're looking at a lot of dry weather. And how warm will it get? Well, let me tell you at the end of the programme.
Now, it's exactly a year until the Holyrood elections, and 4 party leaders were setting out their stalls today. Here is some of what they had to say.
We know that when the SNP does well, Scotland does well. So let's resolve today in 2026 the SNP are going to win for Scotland.
The Scottish election in 2026 is about whether we have a government that continues to serve itself with the SNP or a government in the service of the people of Scotland with Labour.
Anyone who would let the SNP into office cannot claim to be a pro-UK party, and that's why John Swinney isn't scared of Nigel Farage. If John Swinney spent as much time reforming public services as he did talking up reform, Scotland might actually get somewhere.
Well, Liberal Democrats are back. We are winning again. Whether that's the English local elections last week or the general election last year, right across Scotland, Lib Dems are back. We are winning. People want something fresh. I understand that. But they don't need to settle for Nigel Farage. You can get that freshness with the Scottish Liberal Democrats.
So that's what some of the politicians are saying, but what are the polls suggesting voters are thinking? Well, let's speak to Dr. Emily Gray, a pollster and the Managing Director for Ipsos Scotland. Emily, good evening to you. What are the latest polls then suggesting about what voters are intending?
Well, from the recent polls, what they suggest is that the SNP are very much out in front on around about 35% on average on their constituency vote. And I think the SNP will be pretty pleased with that position. Of course, this is a government that has been in power now for 18 years, so a strong standing. And we shouldn't forget how different that is actually from 10 months ago at the UK general election, where the SNP took a hammering and Labour were resurgent. But Labour certainly just now look a very distant second place for the SNP in Scotland.
OK, and what about the Conservatives and Reform, of course, who are now on the scene very much?
Yeah, well, recent polls on average put the Conservatives on around about 13% of the vote and Reform on 14%, so there's really very little in it. But of course, the story of recent months has been the surge of Reform. So back at the general election last year, they picked up 7% of the votes in Scotland, so more than many people had expected them to. And clearly the story in recent months has been of Reform taking votes from the Conservatives, but also from Labour.
And the Liberal Democrats and the Greens as well, where are they sitting?
Yeah, so both holding up, but but behind the Conservatives and Reform. And I think one of the interesting questions for next year's Parliament is whether we see a return to the kind of rainbow Parliament that we saw back in the early 2000s.
And what about issues, Emily? What issues matter to Scottish voters?
Well, what the voters are telling us matters to them just now are those big bread and butter issues. So it's healthcare, it's the economy, it's public services. And again, that looks quite different to the last Holyrood election back in May 2021, where it was the constitutional question that dominated. So independence was the top issue back then that people told us would decide how they voted at the ballot box. But that looks to be less of an issue this time.
Yeah, that was the next question. What about independence? Where is that sitting in people's priorities now?
Well, look, it hasn't gone away. I think Scotland's very much still divided on the question of independence or staying in the Union. But I think what's happened in recent years is just fallen down the public's agenda. So those issues such as health, public services, how the economy's doing, and overall, the public mood is pretty bleak just now. People are not positive about the direction either of Scotland or the wider UK, and that kind of public mood is hurting Labour as the party in government UK-wide.
We're exactly a year away now. A lot can change in politics in a week, but is that the case that a lot could change in a year as well from what history tells us?
Absolutely, and I think you've already seen how much has changed over in the last 10 months as well, since the general election. So the SNP in a much stronger position now than they were then. But I don't think any of the parties will be taking their current standing for granted. I think we see a by-election coming up in early June in Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse, and that will be an interesting bellwether for how the parties may do beyond that.
OK, Dr Emily Gray of Ipsos Scotland, thank you so much for joining us on tonight's News at 7.
Thank you.
Right, let's get a roundup now of the stories making the BBC News app in Scotland. And a man has been charged with attempted murder following 2 deliberate house fires in Edinburgh, which are thought to be gang-related. Curtis Young made no plea. A murder inquiry has been launched following the death of a 28-year-old man. The body of Josh Taplin was found at a property on Caldwell Avenue on Monday afternoon. Some co-op stores across Scotland's islands have been running low on fresh food supplies following a cyber attack on the company. Co-ops say they're working around the clock to minimise disruption. Cases of sickness and diarrhoea have closed all wards at Fort William's Belford Hospital. NHS Highland says it's not accepting new admissions because of a norovirus outbreak. And the operator of an underground power station at Ben Cruachan, Scotland's Hollow Mountain, has put expansion plans on hold. Renewables developer Drax says costs have risen. And for more information on all of these stories, you can scan the QR code there for you in the screen now. It will take you to the BBC Scotland News app where there's more for you, including the couple who had almost 100 bridesmaids at their wedding. Now, after a mother lost all 3 of her sons, 2 who died in action during World War II, she was determined they wouldn't be forgotten. Lady Rachel McRoberts' eldest child, Alistair, died shortly before the war. His younger brothers, Roderick and Ian, served as RAF pilots and they were killed within 6 weeks of each other. Lady McRobert responded by donating £25,000 for a bomber to be called McRoberts' Reply. It started a tradition which the RAF has kept alive to this day, with numerous aircraft having since carried the McRobert name. Rachel Bell has been finding out more.
The grief she must have felt would be unimaginable, but actually only a couple of weeks after she learned of Sir Ian's death, she wrote the letter to the Secretary of State for Air, and in that letter she also enclosed a cheque for £25,000.
A bereaved British mother's answer to Hitler. Lady McRobert, the widow of Doonside, Aberdeenshire, avenges the loss of her 3 sons by buying a Sterling bomber to make raids on Germany.
Your aircraft has now been named McRoberts' Reply.
What a strong, courageous name. What a magnificent gesture of defiance to Hitler by the brave lady of Doonside.
What was the reaction to that, do you think, during wartime Britain?
It became incredibly well known at the time, and she became quite famous around the world, and the story was reported globally about her McRoberts' Reply, her mother's reply, and she gave presentations and talks across the country to try and keep the spirits up for the war effort.
What do you think she would make of there being a Typhoon Eurofighter that still bears Roderick's name, 80 years on?
I think she would be delighted to know that that's still the case, and that the McRobert name is still so closely associated with the RAF, something that her sons cared passionately about, and therefore that she cared passionately about.
Just as Alistair, Roderick and Ian would have wished it. The House of McRobert goes on fighting, and the representatives are a lady and a plane.
That report by Rachel Bell. Still to come, we have weather with Judith and a look at the first AI Viking from Orkney. But first, let's get the sport with Sheila.
Hello there. The Kilmarnock assistant manager Paul Sheeran says it's absolutely no surprise that there's speculation about Derek McInnes potentially becoming the new Hearts boss. Former Aberdeen manager McInnes took over at Killie in 2022, immediately guiding them back to the top flight and European football. Sheeran believes the 8 years in charge at Pittodrie means clubs of that stature take notice.
The way he built Aberdeen up from where they were at the time he went in, to have them consistently competing at the top level of the league and making sure they were in Europe and cup finals and semi-finals year in, year out. I think that that success rate speaks for itself for him, really.
Elsewhere, and the Ross County manager Don Cowie has told his players to forget about their miserable form and reminded them that Premiership survival is still in their own hands. County suffered yet another defeat at home to Hearts that kept them in 11th spot in the division, and if they're still there at the end of the season, they'll face a playoff with a Championship side to maintain their top flight status.
It's a situation that we've been in before. We've come together, which we need to do as a football club, and do what it takes to get the results that we need. Sometimes it's not always about the performance. It's about being strong, being together, and finding a way to win a game of football. And that's what we'll be looking to do this weekend.
Now, it's an exciting time for rugby fans. Tomorrow, this man, Andy Farrell, will announce his British and Irish Lions squad for their tour of Australia. Several Scots have been tipped for a call-up. Earlier, I spoke to someone who knows all about how they'll be feeling, former Scotland and Lions fly-half Craig Chalmers.
I was up against some good players, and I was very luckily enough I got selected, but it's a nervous wait. When you're waiting you get a letter normally through the door, but I was at Scottish Power. I was working at Scottish Power when I was sitting in the garages, listening to the team get announced on the radio. My tour number was number 5, so I was quite early, being the C. So it was fantastic, a great honour, and I was very, very young at the time. I was only 20 years old, so. It was a fantastic experience.
Let's look at selection then. Injuries, of course, could play a part, but who of the Scots do you think should be selected?
Well, I think the Scottish backline has been outstanding again this year. I think they should all go, personally. and I think they might. I really do. I think Ben White's been outstanding. He's not getting that many mentions, but I think Ben White has been fantastic this year at scrum half. I think Finn will go for sure, no matter what people are saying in the press about Johnny Sexton being the coach and not getting on. I think Finn is nailed on as your starting 10 for the test matches for me. And if Sione's fit, I think he should go. And Hugh Jones has got an injury at the moment, but I think he should go. He will go, I think. And I think both wingers, I think Doohan and Darcy have got a great chance. And Blair Kinghorn at fullback. Fullback has been outstanding in 2 or 3 games this year. So, I think he should go as well. And listen, if there was a bolter maybe to go, it would be, Tom Jordan, who I think has been outstanding as well. So, listen, I think if we can get 6 or 7 backs in that squad, I think that's about right. And I think that'd be fair when you look back at how the guys have played this year. And I think in the forwards, I think Xander Fagerson at tight prop, and I think Jamie Ritchie's got a great chance.
Well, with all those names you've suggested there, it seems to be more Scots than ever are being linked with a call-up. What does that say about where Scotland are at, or is it more about where some of the other nations are at?
No, I think it's where Scotland are at. I think we've entertained a lot of the time, but up front is where we don't have the big massive men that 2 or 3 of these big countries have, South Africa, France, Ireland. It's just our physicality at times lets us down. But when the backs get the ball in the front foot, I think some of the tries we've scored this year have been fantastic. They've been top drawer, and I think our backs have shone. And if they can be playing behind the dominant back in Australia, a lot of these Scottish backs in a Lions shirt, I think they'll put in a great show.
Craig Chalmers there, very confident about the Scotland players' chances. Remember, there's lots more to see and read on the BBC Sport Scotland website, including a feature on that British and Irish Lions tour by our chief sports writer, Tom English. And we'll find out everything tomorrow afternoon, Laura.
Will it be the Scottish Lions? As Craig is predicting. Thank you, Sheila. Right, the UK's first AI Viking has been created by the curators at the Orcne Museum as part of a new exhibition. The innovative attraction is part of new galleries created there thanks to a substantial donation left by an individual. Evie McGowan went to see for herself.
Well, when the Vikings left Scandinavia all those years ago, Orkney was one of the first places they came to. So it's pretty apt that the Orkney Museum has the UK's first AI Viking. This here is Ragnar, and I'm told that if you insert this coin here into the slot. You can ask her pretty much anything, so let's give that a go. Ragnar, who was the first Viking in Orkney? She's just having a rethink.
As Freya's wisdom shines upon us, the sagas tell of Rognvald and his men, among the first Norse to leave their mark upon the Orkney Isles, weaving the Norse spirit into the land.
Wow, she is a wealth of information, isn't she, Dr. Siobhan Cook-Miller? Dr. Cook-Miller, why did you choose to have Ragnar be a woman and not your stereotypical masculine Viking?
It was really for that reason. Our stereotype of the Viking Age is often about men who are warriors and about raiding, but actually the Viking Age is about far more than raiding. The Vikings fished and farmed and traded, and women played such an important role in the Viking Age and in the expansion of the Norse out into the North Atlantic.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cook-Miller. Well, if you'd like to come and meet Ragnar for yourself, the exhibition opens in the Orcne Museum this Saturday.
There you go. Evie McGowan reporting there at the Orcne Museum. It is weather time now, and we're enjoying the weather this week, aren't we?
And I'm going to give a wee shout out to Stephen, our cameraman, who's always asking me about the weather. So it's going to be nice to get you across to Aaron, Stephen, the cameraman. So it's glorious, actually. And the great thing about our weather watches, I mean, they really are, they're like superstars to us weather forecasters or presenters. They give us, we get to know their names, but we get to see the ground truth of what's actually happening with the weather. And as you can see there behind me, the weather looks lovely, settled. Scotland looks glorious. And you know what? There's more of that to come over the next, well, you see what I'm going to show you, and soon you're going to see it's just a really unusually settled spell of weather. It is unusual to have this amount of dry weather, and this, I'm going to jump ahead to next week because this is what we have in the symbols chart. Look at this, the outlook. Sunshine, temperatures above average, a really lovely spell. But you know what, again, Laura, you'll identify with this. It's exam time, so the weather gets good. God, few wee things. Remember that feeling, but it's all down to high pressure. Here it is. It's with us right through to the end of the week into next week, and it does pull away, but then another high very, very quickly rebuilds. So high pressure is going to really dominate our weather for the next 10 days at least. Now, as far as tomorrow morning is concerned, with this high, quite a cool, fresh start to the day, and even cold for some, perhaps even a wee touch of frost, the odd mist patch early on, but should burn off quickly. But dry, we'll see spells of sunshine, maybe a wee bit more cloud drifting into the east coast. There's a bit of east still in the wind, which will keep things cool on the east coast. But across northern Scotland, some sunshine, a bit more cloud over the Northern Isles, but that promises to shift as we head through the course of the day, in light southwesterly winds here. Now, a bit of cloud will start to bubble up as we head through the day. I'm not going to try and be too clever and say where, but it will still be bright, there will still be sunshine, and it will still be dry. So cooler on the east coast, as I mentioned, with the onshore breezes here. We're looking at around 12 to 14 degrees, similar values for the Northern Isles. Come over to the west, though, the highest temperatures here, we're looking at 19, maybe a spot 20 up towards the Great Glen area. So some real warmth in the air, and actually getting that wee bit warmer because the winds veer into the south on Friday, bringing up warmer air right across the country. We take out that easterly component, so it means it'll be warmer for eastern Scotland in general and the east coast itself. 18 to 20 Celsius pretty widely on Friday. Again, a few degrees lower across the Northern Isles, the Western Isles, but because there's not much wind, it will feel pleasant in any sunshine. And it's a weekend. I've been mentioning it all day. Get the barbecue out because a lot of dry weather, lots of sunshine coming through as well. Again, maybe a wee bit of cloud bubbling up, but that really is about it. The weekend is looking splendid and still some warmth as well. That's your forecast.
You are going to create a run on charcoal and burgers.
And sun cream. And sun cream.
But we like it, Judith. Yeah. Thank you.
Good exam, kids say.
I know it's not fair.
It comes back, doesn't it? Yeah.
That's all from us for this evening. Amy Irons will be back here tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. Do join her then. Enjoy the sunshine. Take care. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.